All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the Living Coast Discovery Center's Second Nature webinar on birding. I'm very excited because we are joined here by a panel of wonderful women who are out in nature, birding and looking for all kinds of wildlife, and they're going to be here to talk about their own experiences and tell you a little bit about what they do. Before we get started with them, I do want to first of all, thank our partners who are helping support this program, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Urban Wildlife Refuge Partnership is helping to promote this series of virtual videos and webinars. So check out more at thelivingcoast.org/second nature. Also, we have an exciting announcement that we will be reopening starting next weekend, May 1st. So visit thelivingcoast.org/visit to learn more on those details and check out all that's happening at the Living Coast. But there's lots to learn about today. So without further ado, I do want to introduce some of our wonderful panelists. We're going to start with Jen Hajj today from the San Diego Audubon Society. She considers herself a lifelong bird nerd, and she's the events and membership coordinator at the San Diego Audubon Society. So Jen, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. At the San Diego Audubon Society, I am the events and membership coordinator. And what we do there is foster the protection and appreciation of birds, also other wildlife and habitat in San Diego County. And we do this through education and study and through advocacy. We're hoping to bring us to a cleaner and healthier environment for all, not just the birds, but for everyone. And I was asked to be here today to talk a little bit about birding and how I got into it and why I love it so much. I first got into birding, I was working at a zoo because I already had an interest in birds, but I didn't really know very much about them until I went on a trip with some of the other people who I worked with. We went to Argentina together, and they were birders, and they were looking at the birds all the time. And I'm like, what are you looking at? And eventually they let me have a view and I got hooked. So I've been looking at birds ever since. I'm going to share a little bit of a PowerPoint with you to show you a bit about how you can be a better birder. I find that, birding is one of those things that is accessible to everyone because birds are everywhere. I mean, it's said that any place that you are, most places in the world, you're within about 25 feet of a bird at any given time. And if that is the case, then you should be able to see them if you open your eyes and pay attention. So I've got just a couple of tips that might make you a better birder. One of them is just to look around you. If it's true that that bird is that close to you, it's going to be lots of fun to see if you can find it in the environment around you. They might be up in the trees in the canopy, or they might be flying around soaring in the sky, or they might be hanging out on the ground. We have birds taking advantage of every level of the habitat. You can also find them by listening. Most songbirds, for example, are using song to communicate with one another, to find mates, or to defend territories. And so even if you can't see the bird, a lot of times you can hear the birds making themselves known to other birds in the territory. And these are all sounds that you can learn. You can learn their courtship songs, or you can learn their alarm calls. And each one is relatively unique. So you can tell the species that you're looking for, and then you can identify it and find it. You can invite more birds by setting up a feeding station in your yard. This is it's not a good picture, but it is a good idea of what a good feeding station can look like. What I think is really important in a feeding station is to have different kinds of feeders and a water source that can attract many different varieties of birds. Birds all need water, all living things do. So if you put out a bird bath with some circulating water in it, that is a beautiful thing to give them. And then the different kinds of feeders that you can offer would be different sorts of seed feeders, like thistle seed or a mixed seed with millet and sunflower seeds, a peanut feeder. A lot of birds like peanuts, and hummingbird feeders with sugar water. There are recipes that you can find online. The best thing to know about hummingbird feeders is that the water should be changed often, and you should boil it and cool it off before you put it out, so it's sterile for them, and they'll come for that. You can also plant native plants, and it's best to have it away from your house, not close to your house. Because if a predator were to come and scare those birds, you don't want them to be scared and then they flush and hit your windows and get hurt. So that's an important thing. But you can see many different species just from your own backyard, sometimes up to like 25 different species if you start looking. And if you see something that you know, share it with someone, because birding is more fun when you get other people involved. I am often knocking people down in public and saying, "Oh, you got to see this. There's a red-tailed hawk right above us." And sometimes they appreciate it. They must love the enthusiasm, at least. There are ways that you can keep track of the birds that you see. This is a picture of a screen from eBird, which is an amazing database where people from all over the world are sharing the birds that they see. Every time they go out birding, they can put down the kinds of birds they're seeing, how many of each species of bird that they're seeing. And all of this goes into this big database where scientists can now use that data to understand more about how birds move, how birds are doing, anything like weather events and things that are affecting bird populations or bird movements. They can see it in eBird, and it's extraordinary that your personal sightings could be contributing to this very big thing. And of course, you can look for other people who like birds. And at San Diego Audubon, we've got lots of people who do that. We are just now starting up our bird walks again. This is our field trip program. And we have one that goes once a month to Tecolote Canyon. That's our first one that we've brought back. But we do think that we'll be bringing it back 4 to 6 regular field trips over the next couple of months. And so watch our website, find out more about how you can go out with us and learn more about birds at SanDiegoAudubon.org. I think that was all the really good stuff that I wanted to share. So I will turn it over to someone else.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Jen, for joining with us and sharing those quick tips for going out and birding. And it's really important for all of us to remember some of those tips when we go and visit wildlife. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over to another wonderful guest speaker that we have here today, Katie Quint. She's here with the Wildlife Research Institute, and her official title is that she's a research director, specifically researching golden eagles and other birds of prey. And she's been with the Wildlife Research Institute for over 10 years. And something fun I learned about her is that she gets to ride on open helicopters, which means that there's no doors on the helicopters while they're looking for golden eagles. So very exciting stuff. Katie, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. How else can you shove your head out of the helicopter and check for nests on a cliff? The doors aren't off. You bump your camera lens against the window too. So no restrictions, freeform birding in the helicopter, kind of the ultimate form of birding, but you can start small as well. In fact, I personally did. I wasn't born knowing all of the birds that I know now. And in fact, there was at one point where I thought, wow, it would just be really overwhelming to know all the songbirds. And then once you start to notice them and open yourself up to it, it actually comes kind of naturally and easily. So I'm just here to talk about mostly the professional side of birding, how to make that a job, which is a blessing. I am a raptor specialist. I study the golden eagle population and some of the bald eagle population in San Diego County. We, as Wildlife Research Institute, we're a nonprofit organization in San Diego. We focus our efforts on research, education, because what's the point of knowing all of that without sharing it? We've got some advocacy as well. That's where we implement what we know. We do cooperative work with governmental agencies so that they can properly manage our golden eagle population. We do land trust management as well because habitat is one of the most important components of having wildlife, and preserving wildlife through all of those avenues is our goal at Wildlife Research Institute. I'm also a consulting biologist, which means basically in order to get paid to do bird watching, we have contracts with oftentimes development because of a lot of the state and federal requirements associated with development. My job is to go out and do a darn good survey and make sure we know exactly what's there before any of the proposed plans go through. So it actually took me a little while to figure out why I was even out there. And a lot of it has to do with a very important legal aspect called the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Now, that is a treaty that protects most of the birds that you see in your natural environment. And we're talking like boots on the ground. If the SDG&E crew goes out to work on a power pole, I've got to go out before them and make sure there aren't any nests that would be impacted by their work. So that's just kind of a real life example of applying bird watching to something professional. There's also a very important one called the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act, which makes the prioritization of eagle protection something that legally is required if we've got development going on the landscape. Wildlife Research Institute in the past, we've worked on a lot of the larger scale developments like the wind farms that you see and solar farms you see oftentimes in the desert. So one of my first examples of being a contract biologist was going out in the helicopter, taking the doors off, heading up, and we just surveyed every single mountain range, all of the suitable habitat, as we call it, for golden eagle nesting. Golden eagles nest on cliffs, the granite cliffs that you see while you're driving through San Diego on our highways, those big ones that make you go, whoa, what's the name of that one? We also have tree nesters in our golden eagle population locally because they love that open oak woodland areas. That's their main quintessential habitat, although they make it work all the way out into our deserts. So we get a lot of coast live oak as the nesting substrate. And I even saw a historical record of the Del Dios pair near Lake Hodges, which actually is no more because of all of the development that occurred there in the probably 80s, or I think the record I saw from a sycamore nest, which is mind blowing to me, is from the 70s. We also do telemetry research. So we really want to know where our individual golden eagles are going because this is such a long range species, sometimes even migratory, depending on where they're located. So we have projects in San Diego County and also in Nevada and Montana. Montana's the fun one because that's where these guys are migrating all the way from Alaska down the Rocky Mountain front, all the way down into places that we've tracked into literally New Mexico, like the same individual going from Alaska to New Mexico. It's crazy. So that actually helps you understand the scale of the management plans that need to be in place. And of course, we have a lot of international birds as well. So satellite tracking, the telemetry stuff is just priceless when it comes to protecting and saving these animals and their habitat. We can actually compare project footprints, like specifically that I know about exactly a wind farm in Northeast Montana that said, can you let us know if any of your 60 tracks of golden eagles come around our proposed project? And they were right where they were supposed to be, outside of the golden eagle habitat, because if you're a migratory bird, you need that wind to pick you up and take you down the front. And that's just the first place that wind farm people want to put their turbines too. So we just have to get a good understanding as biologists of the landscape and how our protected animals are using the landscape so that we as humans don't invade, as the most invasive species on the planet, the human, so that we don't invade too many habitats and affect the biodiversity. and especially with birds, because I really appreciate what Jen said about how available birds are for you to enjoy. And one of the ways that I do that personally is through photography. That really helps you be patient with behavior if you're patient enough to get the right photo that you want. And also traveling, because whenever I go to a new place, the first thing I want to know is, what are the birds I've never ever seen or heard of that are located here. So Wildlife Research Institute is part of our education component, which COVID put a little damper on it, but we have for the past several years been leading wildlife expeditions to Baja, Montana, Panama, Alaska. These places have a rich biodiversity of birds, and from large and small. We're not just raptor people. We do mountain lion stuff too. But as far as the birds go, it's big and small here, taking photos of and learning about everything, because the more you know, the more you can apply it. Personally, I wanted to mention I have a Bachelor of Science in zoology. I was going, as a child, my dream was to work in a zoo, and I'm just so happy that I had the opportunity through an outstanding mentor. The late, great Dave Bittner was my prime mentor, among others, teaching me all about birds and golden eagles especially. That really got me out of the zoo and into the wild. This is not a fancy background, you guys. I'm outside, I'm listening to birds. Sometimes there's a ground squirrel out there clicking and making me think, is that a bird or a ground squirrel? So just keeping your eyes and ears open, and the best place to bird watch is outside. So definitely get out there. And I'm so happy to take any questions you might have. But one question I know you don't even have yet that I'd like to answer is, how do you trap a golden eagle? I told you I study them and track them, and we put those transmitter units on them to know where they're going from Alaska to New Mexico. And the way to get a golden eagle in hand, you guys, is with a bow net, B-O-W. This is a spring-loaded semicircle. Can you see it? Here we go. We trap this out. We set this trap out with bait. We put either a recycled roadkill deer or a talon-proof vest on a live pigeon, and it's like a taco. Jen told me a good way to represent the bow net here. When it's not spring-loaded, it's a flat taco. So when we're waiting for the bird to come, we pull it back and we hide in the hunting blind and totally incognito ourselves. And once that bird comes down to the bait, we flip the trap and quickly go pull it back, get the bird, take some metrics, put on that transmitter, and send it on its way. Cool. Thanks for letting me do a little show and tell. And I hope there's a couple future biologists in the crowd if they aren't already. And thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much, Katie. We actually do have a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
One person, I think you sort of started to mention it at the end, asked, so do the birds get released? So what happens to the eagles after you trap them?
I don't have any kind of time to take care of an eagle in captivity. Yes, these are just in my hand as quick as possible so that we can get, actually the way we tell if it's male or female is measuring the talon and get those metrics. We take weight. We don't do blood samples in our study, but oftentimes other projects do. And the release takes all of every problem you've ever had feels like it flies away with that eagle. It's a really cool experience.
Awesome. And then somebody was asking if you happen to know if there's any legal requirements for determining the impact of birds when someone has to remove a tree on their property.
No, and this actually bothers me quite a bit. It's laws are really only as good as their enforcement. So reporting things like that to your local Fish and Wildlife Service agent, your regional person, or I honestly don't even have a really good answer, because oftentimes tree trimming, and we know that even a dead tree can be habitat for a bird, like the cavity nesters, our little wrens, our barn owls, things like that. Tree removal is one that kind of goes under the radar, and this has actually been quite a discussion. I'm glad for the question. Maybe I'll throw that back out onto the table at our next meeting here and see if there's something we can do about it, have some action, a course of action we can take on it. Thanks for mentioning that. But it is really good to know if you're going to tree trim, definitely do it outside of the nesting bird season. So like a September, October, November, December, that kind of time frame, even into March can be better than definitely when you could impact a nest. But they're all protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So if you want to get someone in trouble, you can just throw out the acronym MBTA.
Great. Thanks so much, Katie.
Thanks for having me.
And we're going to have time for more questions for all of our panelists at the end, but I do want to get to our next panelists first so that you can hear from our final guest speaker, and then we will bring all the panelists back to answer any other questions you might have for the group here. So, so our next speaker here is Lauren Perez from the Natural History Museum, and she's their community engagement manager. She has been with the Nat for 16 years, and she enjoys scrolling through iNaturalist, which she's going to talk about later, and identifying those unknown observations on those sleepless nights. Lauren relates to me in that she has a young child. So Lauren, it's so great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me, Elizabeth. It's really nice to be here. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen right now. So yes, as Elizabeth said, my name is Lauren Marino Perez, and I work at the San Diego Natural History Museum, also known as the NAT. And we are back open right now, so we'd love for you all to come visit us. We got to open back up a couple weeks ago, and we're really excited to hear that Living Coast is going to be reopening in May. So it's good to hear everybody's reopening, and we get to be physically distanced but still together in a way. So I was invited here to talk about citizen science, or community science as we call it. That's part of my job at the NAT. And what that is when normal folk like myself, I am not a scientist, I'm not trained as a scientist, we help out scientists to do their work. So you might be distracted right now. Up on the screen, there are a couple photos of something, and it's something that I saw in my yard. I came across it and I was like, what the heck is this? And I know that you guys can't use the chat. So if you're with somebody, make a guess with them. If it's just you, make a guess in your head what you think it might be. It's kind of like a gelatinous, blobby looking thing.
Somebody's asking if it's a fungi.
Oh, so wow, that's great. So it's called a slime mold, which is a relative, it's kind of like part fungi. It's kind of like this weird thing that isn't 100% fungus, but it is a living organism, and it helps break down vegetation and other things. So it's one of those really cool decomposers that sometimes you'll find in your yard. I thought it was maybe my dog was sick, but luckily it was not. And so I took a photo of this, and I'm going to share another photo and have you all guess. You could kind of tell what is living in a place even by evidence of living animals. So this is a nest. This is something I came across while walking around in Presidio Park in Mission Hills, and I just noticed some tiny little animals flying around on the outside that might give you a hint as to who built this. I don't know if anybody's guessing out there yet. I've heard termites before. Some people have thought this is termites because termites are known for building mounds. These are actually, I'm going to give it away. This is built by a ground nesting wasp that's local here. And so they built these kind of like amazing structures. It reminded me of Arches National Park, just because it's so amazing and kind of breathtaking. And so I had to take a photo of it. And then our next photo here, more evidence of life. These are tracks from an animal. If anybody has a guess of what animal they might belong to, I found them in the mud, kind of in an estuary area, the Tijuana estuary actually, which might give people a hint. Any guesses coming in out there, Elizabeth? So these belong to not a troll, but a raccoon.
Oh, somebody said raccoon.
Yeah, they're right. Yep. Yeah, they almost look like creepy little human hands. That's why I think, it'd be easy to think they were a troll, but no, they're a raccoon. And so, so all this kind of evidence of life, or life itself, as with the slime mold, brings me to kind of, I have no idea what these things necessarily were, but I noticed them and they looked weird. And luckily there's a thing called iNaturalist that will help us identify all these things. So what is iNaturalist? It's an app. It's also a website. So you can use it on your smartphone, or you could just use it on your computer. And it helps you identify nature, which is pretty cool. So it helps you document and identify nature. And a lot of the scientists at the museum actually use it in their work. So how it works is you take a photo, you record your observation. It's really exciting now for all the birders out there. They just released a sound option to record a sound through your iPhone. Used to be available on Android, but now it's also available on iPhone because birds, as you know, are really hard. As Katie was saying, you have to be very patient and take your time to get a photo of birds. And then you can upload this photo and share it. And you're sharing it basically to a network of fellow naturalists, fellow people that are also interested in the natural world. And those people on the other end will help identify what you're seeing. So you might already know what it is. You can add it in there, what you're seeing. But if you're not sure, iNaturalist will identify it for you, which is really cool. It's a really great way to learn all about the plants and animals that you're finding right around you. I use it in my neighborhood all the time. I've learned a lot of birds by using it. So I just love it. And right now I'd like to show a really quick little video of one of our researchers talking about how they use iNaturalist in their research, because basically iNaturalist is kind of this new tool that we can use to do basically what museums have done for hundreds of years, which is documenting evidence of the natural world all over the world. So what is found where and when it was found. And then those kind of tell a story when we have all those documents together, and we can look back and see if things have changed, if they haven't changed, things are new, like invasive species. We wouldn't know if something was new if we didn't know what had been here before to compare it to. So this is a really amazing way that you get to add to that. You get to add to kind of what researchers have been doing for decades upon decades. Now you can do it with your smartphone. So let's, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and play a little video. Share the sound. Okay.
My name is Brad Hollingsworth, and I'm the curator of herpetology. Herpetology is one of those ologies where a scientist will study amphibians and reptiles. So here in Balboa Park, we have a project, a citizen science project that's associated with our amphibian reptile atlas, where anybody can participate by contributing a photograph of a lizard or a snake or a frog to our website. And in that, we're able to study the biodiversity of both urban areas and compare that with wildlands. The fun thing about science is that we want people to tell us what they find by submitting their photographs. As a scientist, I'm just one person, and I can only go out and see so many things, but with the collective of everybody participating, and students and visitors and everybody that's out there can show the scientists really what's found here a lot better than just a single person can.
Yeah, so as you heard Dr. Brad there, sure, he said a couple of terms. He said community science or citizen science, which I shared before, which is this idea that science it needs everybody's help. Now that we live in such a global world, it's possible to be sharing information with people all over, and scientists need that. They can't be everywhere all the time to identify things. And so Jen shared eBird, which is also another app and kind of social media way to share information about birds. It also connects with iNaturalist, which is awesome. You can upload your information from eBird to iNat, and then researchers on the other side will go through and see what you found and pull that into the research. So researchers at the museum do that, but they also do it all over the world. So people on the other side of the world can be seeing what you're seeing with iNaturalist, and then vice versa. If you go on iNaturalist and explore around, you can see things that people are finding all over the world, which is truly amazing because they're constantly finding new stuff. One of my favorite stories from us using iNaturalist at the museum with our summer campers is we actually documented a new lizard to the park in San Diego in Balboa Park called a green anole. So these are actually from the East Coast. There's a picture of it on the left here, not native to San Diego at all, but they had been used by one of our neighbors in the park to feed their birds. And so some of these lizards escaped, and San Diego's pretty hospitable. We've got nice weather for people and for animals, a lot of animals as well. And so they kind of took up residence here. So we have this new to San Diego animal that, using iNaturalists, students documented it and shared it with our researchers. And that same researcher, Brad Hollingsworth, wrote a paper on the fact that these are now here, and we kind of need to keep an eye on them because we're not sure if they're going to be out competing our native lizards or disrupting the balance that exists there, if they're going to be hurting things. So it's good that we know they're there. We can keep an eye on them. Otherwise, we wouldn't know, and they could be wreaking all sorts of havoc. And then same with this plant on the right here. One of my coworkers found this prickly sow thistle in Los Penasquitos Canyon. It was a new observation for Los Penasquitos. Scientists hadn't seen it there, documented it before, land managers. So it's an invasive plant, same thing as the green anole. We need to keep tabs on it, know where it is, and see if it's going to be disrupting anything, if it needs to be removed, and restoration projects and things like that. And these were all by citizen scientists, just keeping their eye out and their cameras ready and documenting things when they wanted to, and then sharing them on iNaturalist. Another cool example is documenting new behavior. So somebody here took a photo of a coyote eating a rattlesnake, or at least carrying it in its mouth, which had not been documented before as a possible food source for coyotes. People hadn't seen it happen. So, if you can't see it, you can't really say that it's for sure happening. Even if somebody tells you they saw it, you're like, well, maybe it wasn't a rattlesnake they saw. Who knows? It's probably running by them. But if you have a picture, it's really hard to argue with the picture, right? Picture's worth 1,000 words. So here somebody submitted this picture of a coyote with a rattlesnake, and they just thought it was a neat picture. They said, made an observation of a coyote, rattlesnake, and then lo and behold, our curator, Brad Hollingsworth at the museum, was like, this is, new behavior. So that's a whole new documented behavior for coyotes, which is really, really cool. And so when we talk about documenting wildlife, we want to know kind of what is wild, what do scientists need to see that's going to help them? And so we want, wild things are examples of things people aren't caring for. They didn't plant, they're not pets that people are taking care of. So for example, even if you have like a beautiful bird kind of feeder habitat you set up, like Jen mentioned, those birds are still wild. They're not your pets. Even though you're providing food for them, they're coming to eat it. Those still count. So people still want to know, what's flying through your yard, because that lets scientists know timing of year, they call that phenology with seasonal change. So who's migrating through your yard. You're adding those photos of, oh, the Orioles are here now, is letting people know. You can also give kind of information on, is our climate changing? Is it getting warmer earlier? When you look at all that information over years and years, it tells a story. And I think, my apologies if you're hearing my child scream in the background. This is working from home at its best. So things that are not wild. So it kind of gets confusing with animals, because animals at the zoo, so those are not wild, even though people will call them wild animals because they're not tamed. They're actually being taken care of by the zoo. So we don't want pictures of, say, the elephant at the zoo, but if there's a fly on the elephant at the zoo, well, the fly is wild. If you're able to get a picture of a fly on an elephant at the zoo, totally want to see that, because that would be great to see. That's a wild animal. And then with plants, people have potted plants or plants in their gardens. Those aren't wild. So you don't need to take photos of those and share them. And a couple ways that you guys could get involved actually right now is there are 2 projects. One is called the Border BioBlitz, and it's happening the entire month of April. It happens from April 1st to 30th, and it's anywhere in San Diego County. Go out and take observations of wildlife, upload them to iNaturalist, join the Border BioBlitz project on iNaturalist, which I will share some tutorials in the chat that you can look up how to do that. It's really easy once you get started playing around. It's pretty user friendly. And then also the City Nature Challenge. So that starts next Friday, April 30th, and it goes through May 3rd. And the idea is we're competing with cities all around the world to see who can find the most biodiversity. So who can find the many the most plants, the most animals, the different number of species, so types, and also the largest number of quantities. So you want to see how many rabbits there are. If you see 5 rabbits, share 5 rabbits. You want to see all those different numbers in there because it's just like the most of everything, trying to break records with the City Nature Challenge, but also it's pointing out that there's wildlife all around us. So I thought that point that Jen shared was super cool, that you're like 25 feet within a bird kind of anywhere you are. And think about that for insects and plants. Like if you just stop and stare and zone in on something, you'll see all sorts of amazing wildlife that you didn't even know existed. I take photos of pill bugs all the time. I showed you that slime mold. So there's wildlife all around you constantly. I'm always taking pictures in my yard of insects that I don't know what they are. And I would like to show you one last video if there is time. It's a short video, but it just kind of explains what the City Nature Challenge is, how you can use iNaturalist to get involved.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Great. Oh, that's my dog. Here we go.
Welcome to the 2021 City Nature Challenge. Now more than ever, we need to study nature in cities around the globe. We can't fully protect nature on this planet without studying what is living in cities. Help us by joining the over 350 cities worldwide, as some compete and some collaborate to see how many wildlife observations we can gather together. Using cameras and smartphones, tens of thousands of people will take pictures or record sounds of wildlife in their home cities, all contributing to an international database of urban wildlife that will be used by scientists and naturalists to help understand nature in our cities and work to make them better places for humans and wildlife to live. Just imagine how many observations we can make, all working together. Go to citynaturechallenge.org to see if you're in one of the cities taking part between April 30th and May 3rd. Then take pictures of wildlife and upload them to our global database using iNaturalist or your city's preferred platform. Watch as experts all over the world help to identify your observations. Join the 2021 City Nature Challenge or follow along and see how we work together to change the world.
Alrighty, so all of those photos were actually observations made with iNaturalist, which is pretty cool. To see what people have found all over the world, which is a fun part of the City Nature Challenge. And I'm going to put a couple links in the chat right now to tutorials and guides to help you get started with iNaturalist. And I'm happy to answer any questions as well with the Q&A.
All right, thanks so much, Lauren, for that. It's just so great to see how we, as just the average person, can get involved, and it's definitely something we can all do safely right now, in considering that we can just go out with our families and enjoy wildlife and also contribute back to science. So thank you for that information. I highly encourage you to consider the City Nature Challenge as something to do with your family this upcoming couple weeks, and check it out. So with that, we're going to move on to a few questions that have been coming in from the audience for our guest speakers. The first one is to all of our panelists. They're asking about, have there been any measurable impacts on the COVID lockdowns on bird populations and breeding? Katie, you want to answer
I don't know
that?
if there's been enough time, but just superficially, yeah, I know that that's like this grand experimental silver lining that could come out of all of us invasive species being off of the landscape. But honestly, having people be outdoors and oftentimes safely, especially with your masks on, didn't actually give us that long of an opportunity to study the impact. So like wildlife is so seasonal, you know, you've got nesting bird season, and then what the season where they raise their young, especially the golden eagles, they take several months to teach their young how to successfully hunt, and they stay on territory for quite some time. I will say that we have one trail in the county that is part of our advocacy effort. It's called Old Survey Road 97 Trail. That trail is dangerously close to a golden eagle nesting territory during the time where those birds are actually teaching their young how to hunt and survive successfully before they get kicked out for the next nesting season. So that was one that we were really concerned that people being outside more often during that time with COVID could have impacted the golden eagles negatively to be a disturbance to them. So hopefully people having to crawl all over our cliffs and stuff weren't hurting the golden eagles, but we did have a pretty good nesting opportunity this year. We counted 16 out of 25 territories in San Diego this year that had evidence of nesting, be it like an incubating bird on territory or new material in the nest. So the eagles fared okay, despite us being outside sometimes more often than inside for that.
Great, thanks, Katie. Does anyone else want to answer? Jen, have you noticed any differences in the birds with people being more outside?
I think that the difference is there are more birders.
Yeah.
That more people have been, you know, stuck with nothing to do, and they're looking out their window going, what am I going to do? And like, oh, bird, what's that? You know, and then they call the Audubon Society and they want to know what it is. So we've had an increase in the number of calls that we're getting. And I believe I heard someone from eBird talking about how the number of observations in eBird has gone up since COVID, because people are using the database to share what they're seeing.
Great, and I bet Lauren's probably heard something similar too on the iNaturalist side as well. And speaking of, there was a question about the science apps, asking if it's useful to look at insect infestations that are attracted to purposely planted garden plants. So Lauren, you were talking about kind of the difference between wild animals versus animals that are under human care, and how our focus is more on the wild animals. So what do you say to animals that are being attracted by human disturbances?
Yeah, so that totally counts as a wild animal. Insects are on a plant are a wild animal, even if you've planted the plant. And that's actually something that is really helpful for people to track, because we do have all sorts of, with our weather here, invasive insects that show up in our county that people need to be aware of, managers for vector control. So uploading those to iNaturalist is great. I do it all the time. If I see something on my plants, also just because I want to know what it is, and I want to know if it's bad or good, because not all insects on plants are bad. Some of them are really great. So I want to see if I should leave them be, and I take photos and upload them to iNaturalist, and it's pretty neat to see kind of when you just stop and look at one plant, you might be like, oh, are those aphids? And then all of a sudden you'll be like, wait, that's another insect, and that's a different insect, and that's a different insect. So just stopping and looking at the plants in your garden is totally legitimate. And then if you have tomatoes, you can get some really awesome gigantic caterpillars coming up. So keep an eye out for those, because those are fun, and definitely document those too.
Great, thanks. So I want to know what is on your bucket list for a bird to see, and it could be anywhere in the wild. I'd love to hear some cool wildlife to look for out there. Does Jen, do you want to start?
Locally or
Anywhere? Yeah.
Okay. Oh gosh, well, anywhere. You know, there are a lot. There are like 10,000 different kinds of birds all around the world, and I would like to collect them all, but that takes a long time to do. I live up in Idlewild, and I'm really enjoying seeing the wildlife that's up here. It's slightly different than what we see down in San Diego, and I have had some amazing sightings of mountain quail lately that have just blown my mind. That was a bird that was on my bucket list. It is no longer on my bucket list, and I'm appreciating seeing it every day.
Great. Katie, what about you? What's a bucket list bird to see?
Actually, I pulled out a little book here because somebody had asked a question about Costa Rica. So I have one of my field guides from Panama because actually my Costa Rica one is being lent out at the moment. But this bird, the quetzal in Spanish, or the quetzal, was on my bucket list. And I saw like 5 of them camping in a super remote cabin. They were right outside the door in Los Quetzales National Park in Panama. Super cool one. Birder's dream. Let's see what else is on my list. A harpy eagle. That'd be a real hard one to go see. You've got to get a little special ticket and be accompanied by an indigenous member of the tribes in Eastern Panama, which is something I wish I can find the time to do. And it's on my list.
Very cool. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. I know that other people were asking about great resources, and definitely our books and apps out there are a great resource. Lauren, what about you? What's a bucket list bird or wildlife to see?
I would really love to see a crested caracara, just because I've heard that, yeah, sometimes they're here, or there have been, which would be kind of amazing. I've seen them at the museum in the collection, so it's not quite the same, but I can't imagine seeing a bird kind of that. Not to say we don't have majestic, I shouldn't say that, because we have so many majestic birds in San Diego, but I guess it's more exotic than I would expect to see in like a certain aspects than here. And then also, though it's totally not, it's just weird. There was a flamingo at the Tijuana estuary. I don't know, what is it, a couple of years ago that was reported, and I would have really liked to see that just for the weirdness of it.
Yeah, well,
It's still
fun fact, we have a crested caracara on display at the Living Coast Discovery Center. So come hit me up the next time you're down there.
I will, yeah.
Well, one of my favorite local birds too is the cedar waxwing. Oh my gosh. And I'm after the perfect photo of that bird. They look like they're airbrushed, like they're not even real. They are so charismatically cute and colorful.
Great. So can you ladies give, if you had to kind of sum up like one of the best tips for going out into wildlife, spotting nature, spotting birds, what would be like your number one go-to to tell your friends and family?
Merlin ID. It's an app for your phone. And it's related to eBird, but it is an ID app. So you can put in the bird checklists for your region where you are, and you can tell it, I saw a bird and it was about this size and it was this color, and it will give you a list of all the birds that it could be that are appropriate for your region. It is a wonderful resource to use if you're a new birder and you're just trying to get familiar with what's there. It's not going to kick you anything that's weird. You know, you're not going to get any zebras on the list. they'll all be horses.
They have good sound bites too of the songs and calls, so you can listen. You can even birdwatch with your eyes closed.
Yeah, it's a great resource, and it should be on every cell phone.
I say binoculars. I actually just bought my mom a pair of them recently. That's from a company called Nocs, N-O-C-S, that I actually really liked those. They're super durable, waterproof. They don't fog up if you're taking them down to Panama or whatever. And they were affordable. And then if you're like really getting serious with it, I like the Kowa brand, Kowa. And that's what I use. And my favorite thing to teach people, I wish I could run to my truck right now and grab my binoculars for you. If you flip them upside down, they're a magnifying glass if you put things close enough. Get out there and look at even the bottoms of the leaves if you want to.
That's a great tip, Katie. Yeah, I definitely know that that's something we talk about, is just to stop and just look and look more closely. My friend and I were just hiking the other day and wasn't paying attention to the trail, and we almost stepped on a baby rattlesnake. So you got to just, pay attention to your surroundings. Sometimes they're really good at blending in. So
binoculars would have not helped you.
Yeah. Lauren, what
What
about you? Any special tips for going out and visiting wildlife?
Yeah, so for me, I like to document a lot of what's around my house, and I live really close to downtown, so it's definitely quite a bit of concrete, but there's still a ton of nature out there, tons of birds. And what I found that helps me the most is just kind of like you were saying, Elizabeth, slowing down, taking the time to stop and kind of tune in, because once I do that, I notice so many things that I would have just walked right by. So if I'm out there kind of being mindful about my surroundings, the other day I saw like bees hiving in a giant prickly pear on somebody's front yard, which was like, I would have just walked right by it. I found all these really cool beetles in the sidewalk area, like the area, I don't know what we call it here. People have different names for it, but the area between the street and the sidewalk, that kind of vegetative area, was just covered with weeds. And I saw all these really cool beetle pupae there that are kind of like related to lady beetles, but that was just because I kind of stopped and I forced myself to look and take a deep breath and be quiet and kind of still. And I think that a lot of times you catch things that way if you just give yourself the time, and then also aren't freaking out the animals by being loud, but you're being kind of slow too.
Great. So there's a question about putting out bird baths. They read recently that there is a spread of salmonella in local bird baths. So do any of you want to kind of talk about creating habitats for birds and bird baths specifically?
Yeah, I could talk about that. The outbreak of salmonella was throughout the month of March. There was like this super migration of pine siskins into lower latitudes. And so there were a whole lot of them, and they were congregating at feeders, and there was salmonella in the feeders, and so a lot of birds got sick. And so the recommendation was to take down your feeders, take down your bird baths. Don't give the birds a place to congregate, because that's where it gets spread. It goes from poop to mouth, basically. And so any place where you've got poop and you've got birds eating, somebody's going to get sick. The recommendation was initially that you could put things back up on April 1st. And I looked back into that to see how that was doing. And there wasn't really a lot of data that was being collected to see if the outbreak is still as bad as it was. They thought it would pass with the migration, because the birds go back up north to breed and nest. So it looks like it's blowing over. But if you put your feeders out, start slow. Don't put like 10 feeders out, maybe just 2, and watch. And if you see any birds that are bopping around on the ground, really lethargic, allowing you to get really close to them, that bird needs rehabilitation. Get it to Project Wildlife and take all your feeders down. It's too soon.
Okay, thanks so much. And then, so thanks, ladies, so much for joining us this evening and for bringing all of your wealth of knowledge and experiences. And do you want to kind of say any final thoughts or plugs for the audience before we kind of wrap it up? Katie?
Yeah, I just thank you guys for your questions and getting engaged with it. I did answer a couple in the chat, so it's actually kind of cool to scroll through the answered questions and see if that sparks anything you didn't think of yourself, or if it answers a question you had. Wildlife Research Institute, we're a nonprofit. Please, if you are getting excited about what we were sharing about it today, donate, become a member. We've got some really cool wild newsletters that come out and teach you all the stuff that we're learning about that's pertinent for how you can help and take action to help preserve wildlife, especially bird populations. But we are more than birds. We are working on stuff with the Mountain Lion Foundation this year. We're also working with San Diego Audubon Society, advocating for the Bandy Canyon golden eagles, and that trail I told you was dangerously close to them. So please help support our efforts to keep it going. We got to keep checking out these golden eagles every year so that our USGS and Fish and Wildlife Service and California Department of Fish and Wildlife can manage these populations appropriately, because right now there's not any funding besides our nonprofit funding tracking these eagles every single year. We also have a historical record of the golden eagles from the Nat. So like we're all connected here. It's just everybody's collaborating, making sure San Diego stays the most biodiverse county in the North America. Super cool that we live here, right?
Yeah, and if you want to see a golden eagle on display, you come to the Living Coast. So there's the circle. Lauren, any final thoughts for the group?
Yeah, just thanks for having me. I hope now that we're kind of opening back up the Living Coast and the Nat, you guys will be able to come visit us. You can always check us out online. We have all sorts of resources there to help you engage with nature right all around you. Fun kind of nature bingo and things like that, resources for distance learning on our website, and community science as well. So we always encourage you to check out our website and what's going on remotely. And then while you can, when it's safe, to visit us in person while we're open. We would love that. And just hope that you all stay safe and healthy out there and enjoy connecting with nature, and just take the time to slow down and check out what's around you. And I saw somebody put in the chat that the flamingo's still around. So I'm excited to hear that. I'm gonna keep going.
Awesome. Jen, final thoughts for those birders out there?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure to talk about birds and what we do at San Diego Audubon. And if you're interested in birding with us or learning more, check out our website, sandiegoaudubon.org. And we have an event that's coming up that might be really fun for you. It's called Bird Songs for Audubon. It's an online folk music concert featuring 3 internationally touring folk artists who are also birders. And they'll be singing songs that are inspired by birds or have birds in them. And it's a fundraiser for San Diego Audubon. We'd love to have you join us. So go to our website, sandiegoaudubon.org, and find out more about it.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much for joining us. And again, for those of you that are tuning in a little bit later, this was put on as part of our second nature series at the Living Coast Discovery Center, funded by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. We really appreciate all of our panelists being here. So make sure to check out all of their links and all of our links, which we will continue to post and promote. Also, this is being recorded, so if you missed parts of it and you want to go back, you can always check it out on our social media page at the Living Coast. So thanks again, you guys, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.